Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Nick Dixon, and this is a show that's informally called Dixon Cox until we come up with a less pornographic sounding title. I started like that, hello, welcome to the show, because I used to say hello and welcome to the current thing, and it worked well with the music, so I tried to make it as similar as possible because I've got to do the blooming production myself. But just to cut costs. But yeah, welcome to the show. It's informally called Dixon Cox. It's got me, Nick Dixon, one of the nation's foremost political commentators and general rebel, and the star of GB News and the comedy world. It is, of course, Mr. Paul Cox. How are you doing, Paul?
Hey Nick, I'm good. Thank you very much. I mean, we've seen each other plenty of times, but for the purpose of the podcast, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year indeed. Yes, I like the formality of that. You're right. We should get. And Happy New Year to all the viewers/listeners. We're now going to do 10 minutes of banter to annoy one or two people in the comments on YouTube. That's just how we roll. It's how we do's it. We might not. But some
No,
people didn't
what?
like the banter. Some people did. I love the
By
people,
the
like, one person was like, I'm not going to listen anymore. There's too much banter at the start. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. Did the free podcast not start soon enough for you? Oh, sorry. Yeah, because we owe you a living, don't you? You fucking communist. Anyway,
they simply didn't have time. This particular commenter, there's just not enough time in their day.
but there is
We don't.
time to
This isn't.
comment on how they didn't have enough time. They think they're owed our labor. They're not a paying subscriber. By the way, if you want to pay for the full episode, please go to nickdixon.net. They're not a paying subscriber. They deserve nothing.
And this isn't contrived, by the way. You and I don't go right. Remember at the top, 10 minutes of bants. We just start talking, and it's our way of cleansing the palate and clearing our mind, reminding people that life can also be entertaining, and then heading into the dark, dark world of British and geopolitics.
Yes. And reminding people that we are people. We're people too,
Yeah, we are.
with feelings, hopes, and dreams. Well, we used to have hopes and dreams.
Yeah,
Less of that now.
just got feelings now, and some of those are pretty dull.
Not many of them either. One flat, numb feeling of sort of rage interspersed with despair.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, there's no real link there. We're going to talk about today the grooming gangs, which is going to be obviously pretty horrific. We have to talk about it. Starmer's statement, his appalling statement about that. Elon Musk throwing Nigel Farage under the bus, and Farage throwing Tommy Robinson under the bus in some sort of Russian doll throwing under the bus scenario.
The bus is going nowhere this week.
Right. We'll probably talk about Trudeau resigning in the paywall section, maybe, and Mark Zuckerberg's come out very pro free speech, and Andrew Tate has launched his political party. So there's loads to talk about. For full episodes, if you like this kind of thing and all the extra banter that is hated by people on YouTube, go to nickdixon.net for all my full podcast episodes, full episodes of this. And that's pretty much it. And we'll crack on. And what we're going to do now is actually combine a regular section with the first story because it's Ed Davey Watch. But Ed Davey Watch has taken a kind of sinister turn this week because it's a grooming gang story. And Ed Davey said, people have had enough of Elon Musk interfering with our country's democracy when he clearly knows nothing about Britain. It's time to summon the US ambassador to ask why an incoming US official is suggesting the UK government should be overthrown. And Musk replied, what exactly do I fail to understand about your failure to stop the mass rape of little girls in Britain, you snivelling cretin? And that's been blown up. And I actually put on Twitter, oh dear, Ed, can't bungee jump your way out of that one. That got 6.7 thousand likes. But I actually didn't even know if he'd bungee jumped or not at that time. I couldn't remember. He has actually definitely
Yeah,
bungee
of course
jumped.
he has. Absolutely. Of course he has. Still no policy, but he's decided to, of all the people, decided to use X to weigh in on Elon Musk, and was very quickly dispatched. And I've seen a couple of sort of Lib Dem MPs on X falling in behind and saying, you know, X is becoming a very, very unsettling place. I'm not sure I like it anymore. And it's like, well, look, it was very quickly, by the way, what I was going to finish. Look, this is X is now a place for free speech, and I'm afraid free speech means that it doesn't care too much for your feelings. So, you know, you don't have to pay attention to it. You can read it, you can not read it, you can read it and dismiss it, you can read it and get involved. Look, that's the whole point of the debate. You don't have to fight on every hill. And I think Ed Davey, particularly in his sort of Minister for Theme Parks role, really didn't need to get involved in this. I guess he wants to speak for his party and say, hey guys, you know, is that guy at the fight going, hey guys, look, it's really not worth it. Perhaps we should all sit down and discuss. this it's a bit late for that, and Davey's perhaps not the man to mitigate or mediate, should I say? Mediate is definitely the word I'm thinking of. Mediate this particular issue, and he's ended up being called a snivelling cretin, which I shouldn't laugh at because it's particularly rude. But it's just, oh, poor Ed. Look at where he finds himself.
Yeah, I mean, I said because people were saying, "Oh, you're too soft on Ed. What about the post office scandal?" And I actually did write that. I replied to it saying, "All you're known for is the post office scandal and going on water slides. We have so many massive problems in this country, and you are utterly useless." I'm just been sick of it this week because the grooming dancing. I've been very angry. Someone wrote,
Yeah,
"Nick's got a plentiful supply of mics to drop today." Yeah, I've been dropping a lot of mics.
uh, there aren't chaps called Mike that you've been lifting and dropping.
No,
Just for the
that's not, it's not
people
a Dixon
who
Cox
dislike
thing.
the bants and take everything seriously.
Exactly. I've been going for it because I'm so sickened by this whole thing. I mean, speaking of the Musk thing, I mean, there's been the actual incident. It's the incidents coming back to light themselves. Then there's been the response to it, and Starmer's attempt to play it down with his bizarre statement. And he did the usual thing of talking about the far right bandwagon. He tried to tie it to far right bandwagon, which was disgusting. And he tried to make it all about defending the honor of Jess Phillips, as Tim Stanley said, rather than the actual incidents. I said, I mean, I was angry last night at 1:53 a.m. apparently, and I just said, what Starmer and his ilk don't realize is that you can't pontificate about Elon Musk's rude tweets when your country isn't functioning. Britain is a smouldering apocalyptic ruin where rapists run amok, torturing children, and you think we should care about Elon Musk's inappropriate comments? F you, and I didn't say F. You have no idea how much we despise you and your kind. So I was just very angry there, but I think I was completely right. I mean, I've said on GB News, we almost discussed it last week, actually. I almost proposed it, but then it's blown up even more this week.
Yeah,
This Grooming gang thing. And we can talk about why now and whether that's important. But it has blown up internationally. And my claim that I made on GB News was that we don't have a functioning country, as I mentioned there. And I'll say it one more time in case anyone didn't see me say it, because I think it's a good analogy. If you were flicking across the TV channels, especially if it was a normal time like the 90s or something, and you flicked onto the news and there was some faraway country where they were wearing military uniforms, shooting guns in the air, riding on tanks, and they came over and the voiceover said that in this country, children had been of a specific racial group as well, racial and religious group, had been raped and tortured in 50 plus cities for years and years and years. And it's been covered up by police, counselors, social workers, politicians, the media. You would go, okay, maybe we need to step in and do something. Maybe this is a Saddam Hussein situation. Maybe you're not an interventionist and you just say, thank God I don't live there. But the point is now you do. I would say, does that country need international sanctions? Do we need to help that country out and rebuild it? These are the kind of things. Now, if you're not somebody, let's not take the analogy too literally. It might be people going, no, we shouldn't do expansionist wars, etc. But if you look at it, we are now that third world country. We are now that Middle Eastern country, whatever it is. We are a corrupt country all the way through. You can't have one thing is to have these horrific crimes, right? Which would be horrific enough. It's like it's a historical event. It's one of the defining moments in our history. It's up there with any atrocity in history. But then on top of that, the cover up. The cover up is what makes us not a country anymore. I just think,
yeah.
how can either the Tories or Labour be legitimate? How can any of the police be? Like, the whole thing has to go to me. We need a new party. Maybe it's reform, but we need a new elite in there with completely new values, gutting the whole thing top down. We need a new inquiry from a new source who's not attached to the previous establishment, and it needs to actually act on the recommendations. Because last time the 2022 inquiry that was done, no one acted on it. So what was the point of it? People have spent money on it, but no one does it because the same corrupt system is in charge. Any comments?
So look, the biggest problem I've had with the way the political rhetoric has gone, particularly from the left on grooming gangs, is their seeming inability to show any level of critical thinking on this. So the first thing they do is they say there's nothing to see here. When you say, well, hang on a minute, it looks like there's plenty of things to see here, and some victims are starting to say they don't believe they've got justice. Then they say, well, why would you want another national inquiry? Because we've already had a national inquiry, and then they cite the J inquiry. And of course, the problem with that is that a lot of the recommendations from that have not been enacted, and it doesn't go far enough in identifying why things took so long, i.e., people felt that they would be considered racist, or mentioning the fact that victims' families and victims themselves were arrested for raising this in some sort of hate crime incident that's gone on against the Pakistani men. So you and I have read some of the court transcripts, and that very much shapes our view of this, because it's honestly, I don't recommend anyone does. And if you haven't, and you've heard people say, "Oh, this is abhorrent," and I've read this, don't read it. Just imagine the worst case scenario, and then times that by 10, and accept what we're saying on this, because it won't help your mental health in any way, shape, or form. It's
Times by
absolutely
100, because you just
yeah,
it's
yeah.
gang rape and torture over days. It's graphic tortures you've never even conceived of, and it's girls. Yeah, we can't even talk much about it probably even online, but it's girls having that happen to them in one goes to one. Well, there's one where they go to one guy, then they look for help, and the next guy does it, then another guy does it. It's just it's beyond anything you've ever seen. I mean, Scarlett Maguire went on GB News and hadn't read it, and Ben Habib called her out, or said, "I recommend you reading it." Now she should read it because she's on telly talking about it. You don't want to read it because it
Mm.
fills you with an incredible rage and nausea and horror and
Well,
anger, but you have to read it in our
this is
job.
the second point. So you've got this obfuscation where they're saying we don't need another national inquiry. We've already had a national inquiry, and of course, we have had one, the J inquiry, and there have been other uh, inquiries around sort of some of the locations where this has happened. But for reasons well beyond my comprehension, people like Keir Starmer and Stephen Kinnock on Newsnight last night, and perhaps even Jess Phillips, although she hasn't come out and made a statement yet, because that's where it all started, because of sort of her refusal to hold another national inquiry. They're making it a left versus right issue, which inadvertently, and some would say absolutely deliberately, but let's just give the benefit of the doubt for now, inadvertently creates two camps. Camp one is people who are very disturbed by this, very worried, and are against child rape. Camp two, I'm not saying is for child rape, but what they are against is anyone speaking about this as a racial, multicultural issue. So we end up with a situation where we're 100% proven in court, evidenced by endless reams of abhorrent evidence. We have a Pakistani Muslim rape gang situation issue in this country that proliferated for years upon years upon years in the north of England, across, as you say, as many as 50 towns, and therefore tens of thousands of young white girls who, by the way, were thrown to the bin because of multiculturalism. And multiculturalism, whether we like it or not, whether we want it to work or not, has failed in this instance. And if it can fail in the protection of minors, i.e., children, and not protect them from rape from men, organized rape from men, then it has failed. It doesn't matter if that's just one issue. It underpins the whole thing. You need to protect children in order for it to work, and we have failed children in this case. And it doesn't matter whether there's been a national inquiry that says all these things are bad. By the way, men that have gone to prison for this and been told that they will be deported have since come out of prison and not been deported and live in the same towns they did the raping. You imagine being the victim or the victim's family of that rapist. So he's just carrying on his life. He's done his time, which, by the way, was nowhere near enough, absolutely not enough whatsoever, and is now living back in the same town, seemingly with no threat of being deported whatsoever. So he is free to terrorize these people once again, or start a whole new raping gang. Because
Yeah.
I'm very much doubt that the 2 years in prison that they did, or whatever it was, really didn't convert them in any way away from this problem. So Keir Starmer, by saying that people have hitched themselves to the far right bandwagon here, has, whether he wants to accept it or not, has just made this whole situation a lot worse. He did it after Southport. He's done it again now, and it's just not acceptable to say that those that have concerns are in any way far right or affiliated to the far right or are on their journey to the far right. That is totally and utterly unacceptable. When Steve Kinnock went on to Newsnight last night, he was unable to denounce that. He was unable to denounce that. So whether you believe, listening to this, that Keir Starmer meant that or not, what Kinnock did the same day was
SMP.
was was not disavowal. So he just went, well, we're not going to say that. We're not going to say that. So he is saying that Labour's view is, the official Labour view is, that anybody who questions this at all on the terms of race, particularly, is likely to be far right, if not, is inadvertently hitching themselves to the far right bandwagon. Now, that, to me, is
Oh, I thought you meant the
incredibly
Labour Party guy.
disturbing.
You mean Stephen Kinnock? Sorry, yeah, I thought you meant he's Labour, isn't he?
Yes.
Sorry, I thought you meant the other guy who's from the SNP. Yeah, and he went on, just to clarify, he went on Newsnight, and Victoria Derbyshire, who's often awful, but she said to him, she talks about a victim and said, "Is she jumping on the far right bandwagon? Yes or no?" And he just couldn't say no. It was bizarre. He couldn't. She said, well, is she one of them? Why couldn't he have just said, "Well, obviously she's not. We're not talking about her." But he couldn't even say it.
No, and he can't for two reasons. One, his boss said it. And two, my opinion is, it's Labour policy to say it. So any Labour MP commentating on this needs to reaffirm that position. And
I was
there
thinking
have
of
been,
Stephen Flynn, who's basically the same
right,
thing.
yeah, I know the guy
They
you
look the
mean.
same, and they're both lefty
They do
idiots.
look the same. Probably got the same views. I don't know, but the fact that this has become a right versus left issue totally and utterly distracts from the problem here. The problem is that because of multiculturalism, people were scared to speak out about the systematic and organized rape of young, disenfranchised white girls because they were easy prey to these Pakistani Muslim rapist gangs. And the police are guilty of it because there were people within the police that were scared. That local authorities that could have protected these children are to blame also because they were scared. People have been told that diversity is our strength. So point out that it's not would undermine that, and they know that they would have lost their careers, their families, their houses. They could have lost everything just by coming out and saying, hang on a minute. And we know this because whistleblowers from the police themselves or from local authorities that have come out, or the victim's father or the victim themselves, have come under immense pressure to backtrack on those things, arrested in some cases. So you can sit there on the left and commentate on X and say, X is now this terrible, terrible place and anyone's allowed to say what they like. Well, if you are not angered to the point of literally wanting to hurt people because of the story of these white girls being raped, then I'm not sure you're fit to commentate on it. Because there's some things that should pull us all together. It's as simple as that. This is not a left and right issue. This is a child protection issue. And if it means that multiculturalism has failed, then multiculturalism has failed. And if it's failed young girls, who else is it failing? And if we can't have a national inquiry that looks into why that's happened, and has there been a cover up, and have people at the top of government covered it up too, then we have a huge problem. Huge problem. And that's why people like Elon Musk are commentating on it. Now, you can argue how far he's gone and how far he should, or whether we should listen to him or not. But the facts are there for us all to see.
Yeah, they have politicized it. They could argue Elon Musk is the one that's politicized it, but there's an easy response that deals with the issue without just foregrounding Musk. There's ways of not carrying on that politicization, even if you make that claim. They're clearly more worried about it. I mean, Daisy Cooper Lib Dem says Musk comments on grooming gangs grab attention for him, not the survivors of this horrific abuse. I mean, it's nonsense. It's sophistry. He brings attention to it, so that brings attention to the issue. It brings it to international attention. How is that just about Musk? He's obviously just concerned about it. His paternal grandfather, I believe, is English. He's not an Afrikaner, despite some people saying that. He's basically British uh, of heritage, and he cares about the country, and he cares about saving the West, and he cares as a human being, presumably, about horrific crimes. So he's raising an issue that he cares about. Then, oh, he's just making it about himself and making it political. No, he's actually not. It's a chance to just say it's good that the issue has been. Has anyone said, well, it's good that it's been brought to international attention? No, none of these people like Starmer and the Daisy Cooper type said, well, it's good that it's coming out and he's bringing attention to it. I don't always agree with the language and rhetoric. That you could say that. They haven't even said that. But if they do want to make it a left-right issue, if you do want to go there, well, then they've picked the pro-child rape side. So they've done themselves in, haven't they? And this is what the left have done for years and years, of course. They've cornered themselves into absurd positions in order to sort of own Trump or own the right. And it's absolutely pathetic. But fine, they are becoming irrelevant. They are being destroyed across the world, which we'll get into. Trudeau is gone. Trump is in America. Meloni's in. The AfD are coming up in Germany. Starmer's clinging on. I don't know how long for. And one thing Starmer did, by the way, just so many things you said. One, I want to pick up because people keep picking it up when I talk about this historical atrocity. It is ongoing. I'm talking about the scale of it, but it's ongoing. So it's not over. And when you talk about people not going to prison for long enough and etc., yeah, there was one story where she met her rapist in Asda. This is what's happening. So, and we can go into why we need the death penalty, but there was one thing I wanted to pick up on as well, which is Starmer in his statement. Why doesn't he mention that this is white girls? And I know we do this a lot, and we say, "What? Imagine the roles were reversed," and it's a cliche, but I think we have to do it here and say any other race, and that's a huge part of the story, and is front and center every single time they talk about it. He managed to call people racist over Southpaw. He calls people racist before he eats his cornflakes. So why, in this occasion, did he not say? And I'll tell you what, this has happened to white girls because of their ethnicity and because of their religion or lack of religion. And in some cases, there's been some Sikhs and stuff, but it's overwhelmingly white. So that has to be mentioned because otherwise, isn't that pretty far right?
Absolutely.
Aren't you pretty far right? If you don't care about, if they were being killed, this would be a genocide. If you were killing one ethnic group en masse at scale systemically over years and years, that would be called a genocide. We've heard the term rape genocide, which may have some technical other meaning, but it's a good term because that's what it is. I heard that rape genocide actually means that you make it so that people can't have a new generation because they're either physically or mentally too traumatized. It could mean that. I need to check that. But it works as a term anyway because that's what this is. If it was murder, and so there were some people that died, but if it was murder, it would be genocide. So this is a kind of rape genocide. Starmer hasn't gone, this racial group is being targeted. I mean, why not? How sick is that? How far right is that? A racial group has been mass raped and tortured for years and years. You don't even mention that aspect. Why not?
Well, I think because it protects their narrative.
We know why not. They can't have it. Their whole ideology prevents it. But in a sane world, you step back for a second and you say, you didn't mention the race. You didn't. Any other race, they go, there's been abhorrent rapes of, Indian Hindus. It would get mentioned constantly. It would be it would destroy the society. There'd be also, but white girls are just don't count to adopt a David Baddiel phrase.
And in a perverse turn of events, the way you can prove this is there are actually mega left accounts this weekend that are going, but look at this, white men raping people. And it's like, look, okay, at no point, and that's our point here, at no point is anyone saying there aren't white men raping people. There are white men raping people. There are many more white men in this country than there are Muslim Pakistani men. And the problem is the high percentage of those organized rape gangs happen to be Muslim Pakistani men. That's why this is an absolutely massive issue. We have imported the issue. We're not saying that we haven't got our own problems, but those white men, by the way, aren't targeting. And by the way, this would be an international story immediately. These white men aren't targeting young Pakistani Muslim girls. That's not happening. They're not going, oh, it's got to be that. It's got to be one of those. It's got to be them. That's not what's happening either. There's no evidence of that. So, okay, let's just accept your whataboutery for a minute, because that's all it is. A whataboutery when we're talking about child rape. Fuck me. What
Yeah.
is wrong with you? But anyway, let's just accept it for 1 minute. You've got this whataboutery. It does not stack up. The reason one of them's being covered up and one of them is not being covered up is because it goes against this whole multicultural narrative, okay, which we are having to accept hook, line, and sinker. Otherwise, we are considered criminals. Essentially, we are considered criminals. And this all started way back in the mid 90s when we flooded our economy with cheap labor from abroad in order to prop up our economy, in order to grow our population so that we could grow our economy without any thought or care at all on how that would affect the local incumbent culture. None whatsoever. And the way they got around it was to sell us this idea of multiculturalism. Multiculturalism as a thing, as a policy, didn't exist. It is just there to help us swallow the medicine, and the medicine being the constant immigration of swathes of people into the country over decades to grow the economy without any consideration for the culture. And it turns out that what we've done in some instances, in some towns across the north of England, is import child rape. And the reason it's been enabled to last so long and carry on till this day, no doubt, is that there are people on the left of politics who say there is nothing to see here. And if you see something, you are racist. And by the way, you can never be anything worse than being racist. And we've probably got to change that now as well. We've probably got to just accept everybody's racist and go, yeah, I'm quite happy to be racist, because if being racist means that I'm anti-child rape, then fucking throw the key away, because I want to be with the people that are against it too. I don't want to be on the outside with the people that are all for it. And it's excruciating to watch. You know, a lot of what Starmer said yesterday, you're just waiting, you're just waiting, you're just waiting, and then bam, far right. And you're thinking, no, of all the things to do on all the issues, that was not it. He could have played clever. He has no way of playing clever, because all he understands is us and them.
Yeah. And can I just say on that, there's so many things you brought up. Um, you sound like Elon Musk, because someone said to Elon Musk, "Shut up, Elon Musk. We don't want your fascism in Europe." And Musk said, "If protecting children makes one a fascist, then so be it." So he's at that level. It's like, fine. This is the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, someone tried to do it to me on GB News, one of our colleagues recently. But it's like, this racism thing's not working anymore. When you call me racist, it just bounces off now, because it's like, it doesn't work anymore. Often it just means an attack on white people. It just means, by the way, that wasn't in the context of this. That was in the context of the H-1B visa story. But the point is, people say racist, it just bounces off, because it usually just means a way to hate white people or a way to cover up issues, as we've seen here. And the economy, by the way, they don't help the economy. This immigration hasn't helped the economy. So that was what we were sold on, but it doesn't even do that. Not that that could ever make. There's nothing that could ever offset this. I mean, there's nothing that could ever offset. Okay, we're going to rape and torture your children for years and years, but we bring this. There's nothing you could bring that would make it okay. What possible thing could offset that? There is nothing. And when people talk about the white people doing it, not only do they not understand per capita, and often even without per capita, even accounting for per capita, it's still worse. I mean, here in the Telegraph, foreigners 3 times as likely to be arrested for sex offences as British citizens. Crime League table puts Albanians as nationality most likely to be arrested, followed by Afghans, Iraqis, Algerians, Moroccans, and Somalians. Pakistan is not even getting a look in there. I mean, but this is what we've imported, as you say, and there's no moral case for that. Like, okay, guys, yeah, we're going to import child rape and sex offenders, and that will definitely happen, by the way. But here's the positive: once you know it will happen, then immediately you can't bring these people in. There's no case for it, because it's immediately completely immoral to do so. And there was just something else you said, yeah, the idea that, oh, there are white rapists, yeah, this is a specific type of crime where it's networks of often families, often cousins, sometimes even closer relations, and they're all in networks together passing girls around. This is a very specific type of crime. It's like, yes, we know other crimes happen, thank you very much, internet detectives, but yes, and those people, and then you say, what's the motivation of those people? As you said, that they want to engage in whataboutery on this issue anyway. We go, why are you doing this now? Oh, you just hate white people that much that you're like, white people do stuff too. It's like, really, do you think it's the day for that? Do you? It's absolutely disgusting. And one other thing, Starmer called them Asian gangs. He's sticking with Asian gangs. Like, oh really? Is it the South Koreans running amok? Is it, Starmer? It's not fucking Asian gangs, is it? And that's insulting to obviously Asian people who are. Is it Japanese people? Is it Starmer? It's like, is it Singapore? Is it, what are you talking about, Asian guys? No one's using that language anymore. It's bullshit. And then just on one more thing, I can't remember which point this was related to when you said it. Well, I think just the difference because it's white people. So here's a quote that Sam Ashworth Hayes has shared from one of these cases. A child molester who abused two Asian girls, and that says Asian again, was rightly given a longer sentence. So this does even use Asian, by the way, but listen to the point here. Was rightly given a longer sentence than if his victims had been white, because Asian sex crime victims suffer more, a leading judge has ruled. Mr. Justice Walker said it was proper for paedophile Jamal Mohammed Rahim Ul Nasir to have been given a tougher than normal sentence because his victims were Asian. So there was one guy where the victims were Asian instead of white, and it's like he gets a worse sentence. I mean, how deranged does your ideology have to be to come up with that? We talk about woke and we talk about the sort of more sort of some ridiculous elements of it, but we have this critical race theory informing our entire system so that a judge can come out with something like that. I mean,
Unbelievable.
they literally, it's baked into the very fabric of our institutions, including our legal system, to value white people less. Do you understand? That's like slavery. That's like Jim Crow. We are literally valued less. I mean, how can this happen? I mean, where do you begin with that? And people act like, the courts will deal with it. Will they? Because the police didn't, the social workers didn't, the councillors didn't, the politicians didn't. Oh, but the courts are still functioning at just a total integrity, just the height of the British Empire with the courts. It's like, no, the courts are corrupt as well. Sorry, go on.
No, you're right to be angry. It's really upsetting, really, really upsetting, and it's we're not normally led by emotion on our discussion, but it's impossible to avoid it on this. And I mean, disappointed is such a weak word, but I'm incredibly disappointed by some of the reaction of the left because I say some because there's lots of left that are very quiet at the moment and they're deciding they're standing out of this. They're not going to get involved in the debate because essentially they too are very upset by it, but they don't want to throw their side under the bus. But the people
Well,
that
that's
are
sick as
putting
well,
their
if
head above
true.
the well, absolutely. I mean, I don't know. That's anecdotal. I'm not, and even if I did have a name or a friend or someone, I wouldn't pull them out. But we have to. We simply have to, because these people on the left will have children and daughters too. And they're very fortunate because they've built a strong family unit that doesn't require any social services to look after their children or the police to get involved in any way, shape, or form. Their children are not disenfranchised, but friends of their children could be, friends of their children could be, and those people in those towns were very, very vulnerable to these things. And they had no idea what they were getting into because they were groomed. Groomed. So it wasn't just an opportunistic rape. This was, let's identify a group of people that we dislike culturally, and we are going to systematically set about targeting that group of people, which, by the way, are the incumbent group of people within the society that we have chosen to integrate into, or our fathers did, or our forefathers did, whatever it was. Okay, there has been no assimilation there. They have decided wholesale they're going to import their prejudices and use those prejudices to rape young white girls. And that's exactly what's happened. And the only way out of this is that we all come together, no matter what side of the political aisle you sit on, and say, we are not going to have this. You can even, on the left, as far as I'm concerned, you can even say, okay, I think we can still resurrect multiculturalism in some way, but I'm not going to accept that. That to me would be a step in the right direction. That to me would be, okay, we're going to work on cutting this part of the bad apple out. And then we can start to have a bigger discussion once we calm down a little bit. I could accept that. But just to wholesale say, absolutely not, you're wrong, you're racist, and you're far right, to me is almost a bigger crime as the first crime in the first place. Because to turn a blind eye to this means that there are now new victims waiting to be raped.
Yeah, it's as sick as it could possibly be, and it's as deep a rot as it could possibly be. And all these people who want to obfuscate, why is David Aronovich saying, "You're a reminder that neither the Conservative Party nor Reform UK called for a new inquiry into grooming gangs in their manifestos just 6 months ago. I won't bother searching for editorials from the same period, but I don't imagine such calls were there either." Well, the Tories do deserve to go because, yes, they were in for 14 years and they did F all. Reform are a new
Agreed.
party who I don't think can be expected to have everything in their manifesto. But where does that motivation come on to even put that? Is that the main thing? What the claim is there is political opportunism from them and they're just jumping on the bandwagon. To me, I say something different. I say, yeah, the Tories have to go. We all know that. But atrocities take a while to percolate and be fully comprehended. And we don't know why. And there are lots of historical atrocities I could point out to Aronovich where I'd say they took a long time to come out. Does that mean that they're not worth talking about? It took people a while. I won't name any because people get very sensitive about comparisons, but there are lots of historical atrocities where it took a while for people to understand how bad it was. I won't even use the obvious one, but how about Stalin's Stalin is one of them. You know, the leftists refused to accept, and this wasn't the establishment necessarily; it was leftists, but leftists refused to accept how bad it was for years and years until they just couldn't anymore cover it up, and they had to accept and dissociate themselves. But we see immediately after World War II, this happened. People don't. It's so hard to come to terms with it on multiple levels. One, because the details are so shocking, they're almost unbelievable. And because you're obviously going to get called racist. And because, as people have said, they read like the wildest fantasies of a rapist because they're racist, sorry, because they're as bad as they could possibly be for a particular group. And then, so of course, and then the international community doesn't know about it. A lot of these people didn't know about it in America. Bill Ackman didn't seem to know about it. Elon Musk didn't seem to know about it. So and some knew to an extent. So it comes out now, but this obsession with, well, why now? Why is everyone just talking about it now? Does that matter? The point is they are. The point is you can't judge in history when things will come out. That's how history works. Suddenly, there's an eruption of feeling. It's usually multiple factors. It's the existence of X and free speech. It's a general rage building with the progressive liberal establishment. Yes, it's the wild card of Elon Musk. It's reform coming up. It's all sorts. It's people being able to speak more about it when they weren't in the past. Yeah, maybe it's just a level of rage that can't be contained anymore. Who knows? Maybe it's the country's failing on multiple fronts and economically and so many other things. Who knows why it comes out? But it has come out now, and I say, great, it's come out now. And anyone who's like, well, but why? You didn't mention it enough 16 months ago in your column. Like, well, fuck off, because it's come out now. What do you think
Yeah.
to that?
Well, yeah, fuck off indeed. It's more whataboutery. Can we? I've used whataboutery. You know, when we're talking about low-level left versus right stuff, it's very convenient to have whataboutery. So you can defuse and then take people on the journey you want them to go on. Where that needs to stop is where it gets beyond just the day-to-day mundane stuff of politics, where we're just trying to prove points. This is national, international scale, systematic raping of children. Okay, the time for whataboutery is not now. There is no what about. Oh, what about? No, there's no what about. Let me take a subject dear to the left's heart, Gaza and Palestine. If you go anywhere near a what about October the 7th, you end up in this massive great row with them because they won't accept that whatsoever, because as far as they're concerned, it doesn't justify what's happened since. Okay, well, let me take that, times it by 1,000%, and give you organised raping of white girls in the UK under the noses of the senior officials within this country. And don't tell me, please don't tell me that some of them didn't know what's going on. There will be men and women out there today keeping very quiet because they know they could have done more. Okay? So there is no chance for whataboutery within this debate. It's, do we want to stop child rape or not? Now, I only want to hear from the people really that want to stop child rape, because the people that want to essentially condone, and I've stopped myself from saying this, condone the raping of children because of the colour of the skin and the religion and nationality of the perpetrators, they don't have any place in this argument. You wouldn't invite that into court, would you? You just wouldn't invite it into court. So why have it in the public discourse? It adds no value whatsoever. We already know they're guilty. We already know who the perpetrators are, and we know that they've not been deported. They're living in the same town, and the same thing proliferate throughout the UK without anyone stopping it. because it makes us racist if we want to. I couldn't give a fuck anymore. Honestly, I'm just just this conversation alone is really fucking upsetting.
Yeah, it's. I know we're both angry, and the internet connection went slightly there during your rant, which was annoying because you were cooking. But yeah, it's disgusting, man. I mean, would you bring back the death penalty if you could? I mean, obviously, I would. The death penalty, right?
So,
The last people we hung was 1964. Not long in historical terms. Why can't we get back into it? Because of the ECHR, the fucking ECHR. So we need to leave that and we need to get back in and start hanging people again. Because what else can you possibly do? These people have such minor senses. They just see it as carte blanche to just rape endless girls. And we need something. We need prison sentences for anyone involved in the cover up. We need death penalty for the actual perpetrators. We need to deport anyone vaguely involved with the gangs who were not doing the actual crimes but just knew about it. They can all be deported. I mean, Rupert Lowe said a lot of this, except for the death penalty thing. He's saying deport anyone we can, anyone who's British citizen, strip them of that, and then deport. This is the kind of thing we need. We need something massive. I mean, the fact that people are trying to just carry on as if this is a normal crime or sort of an incident that's not ideal. No, no, no. This is a historic world event on a scale that's unimaginable. This is war crimes. This is like a genocide. It's that kind of scale. Eichmann didn't just get to go on just doing his little job. Do you know what I mean? You don't get to just live your normal life after this if you're involved with this. No one
no.
gets to just carry on. But this is what they think, but they're wrong because they don't, and they will not in the longer term. Is my belief. I mean, Alison Pearson put it really well. I'm just trying to find it. She can bet. Here you go. She said, and this is completely right, and it's got 62,000 likes and 2 million views. Keir Starmer has no idea how much trouble he's in, how much trouble the
Mm.
deluded progressive leftist project is in. The Pakistani child rape gangs with their thousands of victims is the biggest scandal in British history, some say in the entire history of the West. And that doesn't overstate it. It is up there with the great atrocities. I said Alison perfectly captures the scale of this atrocity. We have politicians and others who bear responsibility, acting like they can just carry on as normal. No, this is like war crimes or a genocide. There must be massive change and severe punishment. And that's it. We need a wrecking ball. And the only thing that stops me, I have to tone down comments on Twitter sometimes so you don't go to jail because Starmer will put you in jail in half a second.
Yeah, yeah.
So we need a wrecking ball. And
Oh,
when I say wrecking ball, I'm not talking about physical violence. I'm talking about a wrecking ball, like he says in LA Confidential. Do you really want to tear all that down with a wrecking ball? The whole fucking system. Labour and Tories, gone. Any policeman involved in this, any councillor, any social worker, any media figure, all need to be punished. Both political parties need to go. New political party comes in with an inquiry that looks into this as if it was massive war crimes that happened under a specific regime, like the ones we've seen in the 20th century, and that's how it needs to be treated.
so a couple of points. Death penalty. I'm quite liberal on the death penalty. My view up till pretty much this point in my life is that I don't like the idea of the state putting people to death, and I'll tell you for why. Can you imagine Keir Starmer being in charge of that process? Now, there are a lot of people who will tell you that there's no way that Keir Starmer could have influenced the Southport rioters' jail sentencing. Really? No way at all. The guy was DPP for 4 years, 8 years, or whatever it was. He built up a network of people that he still has today. He had incredible influence over those people and definitely persuaded people. He persuaded people just through fear alone to plead guilty for crimes that they didn't commit and later committed suicide in prison because they were in prison for crimes they didn't commit. That he put incredible amounts of pressure on the justice system to give the harshest possible sentences so that people that had never had a criminal record before, that just happened to found themselves as angry as we are now, caught up in a riot situation or saying something on Twitter because they didn't have the wherewithal about them, like fortunately you and I have when we're tweeting, not to go too far, and ended up with 2 years and 8 months. 2 years and 8 months. That's incredible. So my biggest fear is that somebody like Keir Starmer could preside over that, and before you know it, you and I are being executed for saying the wrong thing. So I do have a sort of quite a concern about executing people. Now there are other ways we could do. I mean, by the way, we're not exercising our justice system to anywhere near the fullest lengths for these people. In and out of prison in 3 years, not being deported, living in the same city they committed the crimes in. Give them a life sentence. Castrate them. They'll never want to do it again. Castrate them. There are other things that we can do. Now, in the cases where we absolutely know, of course, I have no problem with them being sentenced to death. I just have a problem with the people that are in charge, because I think our justice system is entirely politicized now.
Of course. Can I just give my rebuke to that? Or
Yeah, of
rebuttal,
course,
sorry. Just quickly, before you go on to too many other points. It's one couple of things. Well, one, on your wherewithal to tweet. We don't really know where the line is with tweeting, and I often wonder,
No, well, that's true.
will this one get me in prison? But you're right. I mean, one tries to do the best, but and people who aren't as media savvy in jail, but we all could be. The state is now killing people with assisted dying, so the state is going to start killing people. That's one argument I have. But my key argument, and see what you think to this, is that Starmer wouldn't introduce the death penalty. Of course, I don't want Starmer to have the death penalty, but that's in a scenario where he's suddenly gifted it tomorrow. But it wouldn't be like that. Starmer has gone around the world campaigning for the abolition of the death penalty. He's got off brutal murderers in places like Uganda and Malawi, and he's been proud of it. One person who buried their stepson alive, for example. These are the kind of people Starmer has gloated about helping to get off because he's got an inverted morality. He wouldn't bring back the death penalty. He's Mr. Human Rights. He's Mr. ECHR. We'd have to get out of the ECHR and bring it back. So the ideology that would bring it back would be so opposed to Starmer's that it would be a sort of much more righteous state, much more in line with traditional justice. You see, this is my argument. You may call that sophistry. I think it's actually pretty strong. I think a state that would reintroduce the death penalty would, by its nature, be a much wiser state, you see, especially if it targeted on people like these child rapists. And so, of course, Starmer in some hypothetical gifted it tomorrow the ability to kill us all. No, though he will do it via assisted dying. But and just lastly on that, a majority of the British people already support it, as I've said before, probably for child murder, serial murder, and terrorist murder. So there's already a majority support for the death penalty. This would just add these rape gangs as an extra category. But anyway, that's my argument. But go on.
Yeah, and I think it's worth having that rebuttal as well, because I definitely know that there will be people who listen and watch this that will be more on your side of that argument than they will me. I know that because some of them think you're taking me from liberalism to where you are.
I saw that comment.
and I think, oh, okay, it's interesting that that's their perception of where I am. And, fair enough. Okay, perhaps I'm not along the righteous journey.
You're so agreeable. You'll just go along with just appalling things because you're just a nice guy. Well, Nick says we've got to do this.
I'm just get the vote. That's dark. Just making the gallows.
Yeah.
What are you doing that for, Paul? Well, something Nick said on the podcast.
He convinced me with his rhetoric. Yeah.
So, look, I think it's an important argument to have, and I think it's it feeds its way back into lots of things that are going on at the moment. Not everything's clear cut, but one thing that is clear cut is Pakistani Muslim male raping gangs are fucking bad. And if you do not believe that's the case, and you can't bring yourself to hear that or even say that yourself, then there should be some sort of realignment camp, Nick. So I can be quite strong on these matters, but with regards to some of the other things around it, well, we shouldn't dash in too hard on everything. And I've caught myself, by the way. This is. I think I used the word disappointment earlier. Now, the reason so many people are disappointed with Jess Phillips, by the way, is because loather or hate her, and those are the only two options, I'm afraid. She has done a lot of work in the background for women and girls. She really has. She's just failing now. And I don't think that washes away any of the good work that she's done previously, and I don't think she should be immediately killed or anything like that. But against that background of all that good work that she has done to protect victims of domestic violence, for instance, this was her greatest opportunity. This was her greatest opportunity to say, for me, whilst this is going to cause me personally a lot of problems within my constituency, I am going to stand by my principles and we're going to protect these women and girls. And she didn't do that. And if you believe, by the way, and I keep having the argument in my head, so I'm having it out loud as well. If you believe that actually the local inquiry at Oldham is the right way forward, well, then you're underestimating the scale, because the scale is much bigger than that. And it's not about whether we've had national inquiries before. It's about having a national inquiry against the context of everything we know now. Let's investigate if there was a cover up. Let's investigate if there was a cover up, which we know that there was, who was responsible for that and why. And perhaps we don't even have to be entirely punitive against those people. It's the why for me. Why are you scared? Tell me why you're scared. Put them in a safe space, ask them the right questions, and say, why were you scared? And let's start dealing with that problem as well. Because if you're protecting rapists against children, then fuck me, you are either very, very warped and shouldn't be wandering around in society, or you're very, very scared. And people will do things against their principles if they're scared. And perhaps Jess Phillips is one of those people right now.
Yeah, well, we've done about 50 minutes. I don't know whether to do this behind the paywall or talk about Jess Phillips, but yeah, Elon Musk said some things about her and that she's evil and should go to prison and so on. I don't want to get involved with just talking about Jess Phillips, especially because she'll sue us all. But she, it was all about her blocking this inquiry when the Oldham requested this inquiry. And some people speculated that if you've got a constituency where you've just won by 693 votes only, and you're against this Workers' Party who are very much pro sort of Palestine, etc., then you might be motivated by that. And I don't know because I can't read her mind. But some people suggested that might be a concern. And you could even argue perversely that she sort of has a duty to represent her constituents. And actually, it's the fact that they've been brought in the first place that's the problem. But now she is compelled to. One could make that argument. Yeah, so that's the Jess Phillips thing. I mean, should we talk about this Musk thing? It's almost like such a big topic. I'm wondering if we should do it in the paywall bit, but I don't want to get because I don't want to get caught between two stools of starting it and not being able to put it all on the free. But maybe we'll just say a bit about it because Elon Musk said that Farage must go. This was fascinating. He suddenly tweeted saying that Farage doesn't have what it takes to be leader. And it seemed to be all be to do with Tommy Robinson. Musk was very pro Tommy Robinson. He was tweeting free Tommy Robinson, etc. Multiple tweets about him. Farage did this classic thing of distancing himself from Tommy Robinson. And he even said this slightly patronizing thing, which I think set Musk off of, well, I'll explain to Elon when I see him that Tommy Robinson's actually in jail for contempt of court. And Musk replied to a tweet on this from, I think, Ben Habib, wasn't it? And he was saying, FFS, for fuck's sake, I know he's in for contempt of court, but it's far too harsh and he shouldn't be in solitary. So, they were underestimating the intelligence of Elon Musk just because of his sort of shit posting, which is not a mistake you want to make. So then he said, right, Farage doesn't have what it takes. And since then, he's kind of rolled it back. He's retweeted Farage a bit, and you think maybe he's calmed down because he can be impulsive, as we noted during the H1B thing. And he's liked two of my tweets. I didn't even say it on GB News when I had the chance. Can you believe I didn't even say it? It's so unlike me. He liked two of my tweets on this topic, even after I've been dissing him for a week, which obviously you won't probably know about. But he's been retweeting all my friends, Carl Benjamin, loads of times. And he's even just now, we might talk about Zuckerberg later. I've just seen that he's tweeted, "This is cool. Facebook dumps fact checkers to restore free speech." So, but this was really fascinating. Now, people have said, why does Farage keep doing this? And I said, look, one thing you're underestimating is how much he probably just genuinely loathes Tommy Robinson. Because people say, why was he so emotional on this? And why does he have to attack Robinson? Why can't he just kind of say something more appeasing of Robinson's fans while not necessarily totally embracing Tommy Robinson? There is a way of doing that. But I think it's because he genuinely hates him. And people said to me, why would he loathe him? I'm like, are you serious? Every movement Farage has tried to make, and this is from his sort of perspective, he's been dogged by people to the right, in his view, making him unelectable. And so he's kicked out BNP members and not allowed them in his parties and so on. And now he sees Tommy in that kind of bracket. Probably isn't true if you look at Tommy's actual views. Very very pro multi-ethnic. He says bring in Sikhs, bring in Hindus, etc. He says he's very pro-Israel. So he's a kind of neocon, neoliberal of some sort. with that one thing about Islam, that he's really against Islam. But then so is Sam Harris, so is Christopher Hitchens, so is Douglas Murray. So these are like lefties, liberals, neocons. He fits somewhere more in that. But he's perceived in this way as purely toxic in our media. So while Musk can comment on him how he wants, and Jordan Peterson can have him on the podcast, and Gad Saad, in our country, he is the devil because of two things: one, our toxic media; two, our class hatred of the working class. And I might add in three, some of his methods, of course, haven't been great. But in other countries, you can just say, "Oh, so what's your story? Oh, my town was taken over, it was ruined. Then I got involved in politics, didn't want to. I did this and that." And controversial but interesting figure with pros and cons. In this country, just the devil. Just that's it. Just every time you talk about him.
Yeah.
So because the other countries don't have that, it creates this disparity. And Farage really kind of messed it up. Could have done a lot better with the statement. Alienated all the Tommy fans who are perfectly normal British people who have the same concerns. What you say about him is, look, Tommy Robinson has been brave in raising some of these concerns. There's no doubt. Has he done things the correct way? Often not. And there's an accusation that he distracts from these topics or makes it about himself. And so those are the two views on him. And we wouldn't have him in our party because of the methods and how he's gone about things. But his fans have completely legitimate concerns. Something like that is very possible to do as a statement, but Farage balls it up. I'm just looking for the Rupert Lowe statement, which actually did nailed it. Here it is. I said very balanced statement. It doesn't throw anyone under the bus, so it can be done. So Rupert Lowe says, more awareness has been raised around the rape and abuse of thousands of vulnerable British girls in the last few days than has ever happened before. As a country, this is a conversation we needed to have. It shames our political class that it has taken a man of Elon Musk's influence to drag this into the light. This is where the focus should remain, not elsewhere. Swift and brutal justice for those responsible. Tommy Robinson's role in exposing these gangs should be acknowledged. He is not right for reform, but I do not think that his efforts in revealing these heinous crimes should be overlooked. But I do think that his efforts in revealing these heinous crimes should not be overlooked. Same thing. I thank Elon for his kind comments. This is probably about Rupert Lowe being leader or being better than Farage. I just want to do what is right for my constituency and my country. That is my only interest. Nigel is leader of reform. He made Brexit happen, and for that I'll always be grateful. I look forward to working with Nigel and the entire team to continue to hold this incompetent Labour Party to account, democratise our own party, win the next election, and form a reform government. A power from outside the existing political establishment is the only way to achieve the change this country so desperately needs. And that last part is very much what I've been saying. But there you go. Tommy Robinson's role in exposing these gangs should be acknowledged. Fair. He is not right for reform, fine. But I do think that his efforts in revealing these heinous crimes should not be overlooked. Very easy. And people point out Tommy Robinson never asked to be in reform, so that's been a red herring from Farage anyway. So why is that so hard? Anyway, that's the kind of basics of that debate, Paul.
Yeah, it's very interesting how those two things got conflated. I don't know why Nigel Farage said that Tommy Robinson would never be part of reform, because that's never been mentioned. So it's very interesting to me. And I don't think Elon's ever mentioned, I don't think anyone, Tommy Robinson, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, as he's known, has never said that to my knowledge. Not that I'm up on what he's doing. Well, I know what he's doing. He's in solitary confinement in Belmarsh.
They put out a statement. John Wong, who formerly of Lotus Eaters, went to visit him and tweeted about it. But yeah, his whoever puts out his tweets said that Tommy, his message is stop attacking me. I don't want to be in reform.
Yeah, so fair enough. Good to have an official statement from Tommy Robinson. What Elon and many people around the world won't understand is that Tommy Robinson, Stephen Yaxley Lennon.
You sound like the fucking Guardian. I think you keep saying this. I appreciate that you're keeping journalistic standards on my podcast so we don't get sued. But
yeah, so the only reason I'm doing that, by the way, is not for those reasons. It's because he had to create that pseudonym at one point in order to protect himself, and I would say that protection is now long gone. Now, Tommy Robinson is he will never escape that now, and neither should he have to. I don't care either way. But I think,
and your name's not even Paul Cox. It's probably the time to acknowledge that.
It's not. No, it's Paul Knobbelly, actually, which is one of the reasons that I've had to change it.
Yeah, it wasn't really safety. It was more just an embarrassment issue.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Knobbelly is not something you want shouted out in the doctor's surgery because they think that's why you're going in.
Well, you still went with Cox, which is strange, but you're like with an X. Guys, it's an X.
Yeah. It's written there. Oh my god, I spent half of my life saying that. So the actually Lennon thing is actually so that people it creates, in my mind, it creates a human being rather than this caricature of a man. Okay, and what people don't understand about Tommy Robinson is that within UK politics, he is political kryptonite. There isn't, by the way, and still isn't, a UK politician, irrespective of what's happened in the last 4 to 7 days, that could come out and support Tommy Robinson and last any longer than another few days in UK politics. If Nigel Farage come out and said it, he would derail everything he's done for the last 30 years. So he cannot do it. Whether we like that or not, he cannot do it because our establishment system just would not allow it. Would not allow it whatsoever. And people would be looking at this, go, well, that's the problem. I can't believe it. That's the bloody problem. Why is Paul saying that? That's the problem. We need to get over that. Well, yeah, perhaps we do. But fact remains that if he was to do that, he wouldn't be able to continue in UK politics and therefore arguably wouldn't be able to continue on the journey that a lot of people want him to continue on. So Tommy Robinson has got a real checkered past. And it's really interesting that you say, if he has done, if he goes onto an American podcast and tells his journey, people will go, oh, that's fascinating. That's really interesting. I'd like to hear more about that. For whatever reason within this country, and I think you've already nailed it, so I don't need to say it, it's a classist issue. It's how terrified we are about talking about race or a particular religion, such as Islam. It's just complete faux pas across everything. It still is. Now, there's still some way to go in order to change that for the discourse to be open. And the Overton window is shifting. And Elon Musk, by the way, is really helping shift the Overton window because more and more we're able to openly discuss these things. You and I probably would have spoken more hushed tones 12 months ago about this, just to make sure that we didn't get thrown in prison. Whereas now we feel much more comfortable. The world's open to some of this. But Tommy Robinson at the moment is not someone that is going to be accepted just yet.
Well, can I push back on some of that? Well, one thing I did talk
Feel free
about
to
this.
push back on it all.
6th of November, 2023, I said on GB News, Tommy Robinson's been right about a lot of things. All TV channels are very uncomfortable talking about him. So, I mean, I took a chance, to be honest, even saying that. But the clip popped up and I was like, oh, yeah, I did say that. And that's not that early in this whole scheme of things. You know, when people are sort of talking about how early they talked about grooming guys, I've talked about them here and there for years. But, you know, I'm glad I said that. And I did it again on Leo's last Saturday Night Showdown on GB News the other day, last version of his show. I just give the points dispassionately. I was like, you know, here's what he did that was brave. Here's what he did that might be silly. Here are his actual political views, you know, and here's how he's perceived. And it's just people are just so emotional, as you say. People just, especially on the middle class, they just see this. They just see the skinhead, basically, don't they, from the 70s or something. They just think, oh, here's a racist working class thug. That's all they think. But in a different context, he's not that. And a lot of his criticisms have some validity. So it's a completely different context. Here's what I'd say. Again, I'm trying to find my own tweet on it just because I phrased it better, but I won't look at that. I just wonder if this tactic has ever worked. There's this received wisdom that what someone like Farage has to do is to tack to the centre, which is a fiction in my view anyway, and to therefore garner enough votes. But I just don't necessarily believe that is how you do it, or that really is a thing. It's an assumption. Because of World War II, we live in the post-World War II paradigm where everyone to the right is Hitler. Therefore, we must condemn everyone to our right. The left doesn't condemn people to their left. You know, Starmer finally he's got some people out of the party. You could argue in party politics there's an element of that. But certainly in rhetoric, the left doesn't condemn the left. The right condemns the right constantly and bombs the left. And it's kind of like, does that actually work? Has that tactic actually worked? If you look at things like elite theory, I'm not convinced you actually need to do that. Another thing I'd say is, this whole centre, it's all a fiction. The reality is Westminster's completely out of touch with the people. For example, the majority of people believe in the death penalty for those crimes I mentioned earlier. But that's not on the table. The people in this country have always been vehemently against high levels of immigration. This happened, you know, when Enoch Powell was in trouble, the people agreed with him. Let's just be honest, there was documentaries and things. The people agreed with him. You know, his speech got him in trouble and Westminster was uncomfortable with him, but he wasn't saying anything the people didn't agree with. the game really is that you've got this Westminster Overton window, which is incredibly narrow and incredibly unaligned with the people at this point, which is why we're seeing so many tensions. And to me, the real question is: do you have the balls to go outside the Westminster Overton window, but appeal to the people and take that chance, and then you will be elected? Now, will you be attacked on the way? Yeah, of course, but that's how, to me, you would be elected. So I don't really believe this myth of like, oh, I've got to appease the establishment and say all the right things, and then maybe let me in. Of course, your argument holds some weight as well. He associates with Tommy Robinson. He loses a load of people, but would those people vote for him anyway? I mean, he's losing. He's losing people who
No,
would
I don't.
never
I
vote for
mean,
Farage. Go on.
it's not about whether he loses people, and I think anecdotally, if you look on X, he wouldn't lose that many people whatsoever. There are still people that are squeamish when it comes to Tommy Robinson as used in part of a political debate. But let's just forward on maybe 3 to 6 months. Uh, Tommy Robinson's released. It's more and more accepted that he played his part in something that is now being exposed. And by the way, he wasn't the first person to come out and expose this, but he's definitely been the person to risk his own liberty to do so. And you can argue whether the way he's gone about it is uh, self sabotage or not, shall we say. And quite clearly, there are arguments for and against that. And the reason there are arguments for and against that is because the contempt of court is based on something that not everybody believes is true anyway. So, I mean, at the moment, as the law stands, he is in contempt of court. But there are things that underpin that people truly and genuinely believe, and it seems to be holding some water more and more, that wasn't contempt of court anyway because it should never have been in the first place. But let's just keep going with this analogy, and we're 6 months in the future. Tommy Robinson's out. It's more acceptable to say there was a cover up. It's more acceptable to say that Tommy Robinson played a huge or significant role within that process. And we're now starting to tackle these things more transparently. And it's looking like it's very unlikely to ever happen again. And some of the victims are getting justice. The first politician that comes out and says, we need to thank Tommy Robinson, will be well ahead of the bunch, because the Uni Party, Kemi Badnoch, Keir Starmer, are never going to say that. They're never going to acknowledge that. Even if it screams at them in the face that it's true, they're never going to do that. So at some point, a politician is going to say, I think we need to thank Tommy Robinson for that, if all the things I've just said come to fruition. And whoever does that will take leaps and bounds ahead in the political race, particularly on the multicultural issue, particularly on putting Britain first, and particularly on protecting our borders, which is going to become an absolutely huge issue over the course of this parliament. And taking it back even further slightly, we talk about, are Keir Starmer's days numbered? Yeah, I can see. I've already said that by the middle of from the middle of this year onwards, so 2025, June onwards, I can see there being huge problems for Keir Starmer. What I'm not convinced by at the moment is that means that the Labour Party and their ethos is doomed. It might be in the public realm. It certainly is amongst people like you and I, and probably a lot of our listeners and viewers. But there's still a curve that we're going through. Now, that curve probably will be exponential. So it might ramp right up towards the end, and we'll see huge changes towards the end of this parliament. But there's still some way to go. But I think it's going to take a very brave politician. And let's face it, we need some bravery. But it's going to take a very brave politician to put their head above the parapet and say, it's time to thank Tommy Robinson. Because that's essentially what could happen and probably will happen, because the more that gets uncovered about this, and the more we realise there was a cover up, and the more we realise why, the more we will start looking around at who was saying this is a problem.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's those people that will get some credit eventually.
Would you say that Rupert Lowe has already done that by acknowledging Tommy Robinson in that statement, and he is an MP after all?
Yeah. So Rupert Lowe, we've talked previously about Wes Streeting being on manoeuvres, i.e., he's manoeuvring himself to potentially be the party leader and they're the prime minister when Keir Starmer eventually falls. Rupert Lowe, I would stop short of saying that he's on manoeuvres, but his statement was like, I really look forward to working with Nigel, not as his leader. We should thank Nigel for, list a few things we need to thank Nigel for. But what I'm concentrating on the most is supporting my constituencies and making this country a better place. That is very close to being on manoeuvres. There's no two ways about it. And Rupert Lowe will recognise that there is a small groundswell occurring at the moment with regards to those people that are looking around, particularly yourself, Nick, saying, look, perhaps Nigel Farage isn't right to lead the Reform Party. Although, let's face it, he is the Reform Party. It might as well be called the Farage Party. But let's ignore that just for a minute.
So, Paul, your internet connection went again there. You're off in the sticks. And so I lost you. You were talking about Rupert Lowe potentially being on manoeuvres and comparing it to Wes Streeting, I believe.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit last week about Wes Streeting and how he is definitely on manoeuvres because he sees that, as the rest of us do, Keir Starmer's days will be numbered at some point, and he's manoeuvring himself into position as potentially the next Labour leader and therefore the Prime Minister. I'm not sure that the same can quite be said of Rupert Lowe, but what's interesting about Rupert Lowe's statement with regards to Musk, Farage, and Tony Robinson, very different guy. Tony Robinson.
Oh, it just keeps digging up stuff about Islam. Oh, another one.
Unbelievable. And about Tommy Robinson, but his statement sort of was saying, I look forward to continuing to work with Nigel. He never said under his leadership. He also said, he's part of the Reform Party, which if he became leader of, he still would be, and that he's focusing on his constituents and, the problems that face Britain at large. So perhaps Rupert is reading some of the tweets. Perhaps Rupert's getting a sense of the mood music within and around the bazaars, that perhaps he is seen as someone who could potentially replace Nigel Farage. But let's not forget that the Reform Party really is the Nigel Farage party in more ways than one, not just in a symbolic way, in the fact that he owns the majority of the shares. So therefore, it would be very difficult, I imagine, for him to stand aside in any way. So I'm not sure we're going to see any changes there, Nick. What do you think?
Well, some people have asked me, people said people keep saying I should get into politics on Twitter. I said, look, many people have said this. We're looking at it very closely, and I've said there's never been anything like our movement in the history of this country. And I write stuff like that, and then people take it seriously, and I let them because who knows? And I said, obviously, I respect Nigel as a colleague and for everything he's achieved, but I will step up if necessary. So it's there. My hat's in, as Alan Partridge would say, my hat's in the ring. You've ever seen that one? And then he's like for best Norfolk person ever or something. Then he's like, I'm taking my hat out of the ring because he hasn't got enough votes. So he just takes his hat out there. You also reminded me with Tony Robinson, of course. He played Baldrick. American listeners may not know, but he was in Blackadder. Tony Robinson just, my lord, I have a very cunning plan to get rid of Islam. Like the Tony Robinson crossover.
Just a little bit of levity there in what's been quite a serious discussion for the freebies here.
Yes. I was worried you'd frozen again. Go on.
No, I'm not quite sure what's going on here in the sticks. We've got some sort of some weather on the way. We're okay, Nick? Are we? We okay?
We're back again for now. Let's see if we can carry on. I just wanted to quickly come back on a couple of those points about Rupert Lowe and the whole thing there. I was talking before about it's frozen again, so I can't be sure. Oh, you're back. That's your door. The door. You think the door?
Well, I've just opened. Weirdly, I don't know if that'll work. You can't see it on shot, but I just opened the door just to see if that would help. The old door preventing the internet Wi-Fi waves getting in situation.
It is we're gonna have trouble doing the pay section. Anyway, I had a few points. They seem a bit old hat now because we've had all these internet connection issues. But basically, we might be in a moment. You're talking about whether someone could one day say, Tory Robinson actually did some good things in a mainstream political party, and Rupert Lowe has kind of said it. We may be in a moment, one thinks of Darkest Hour, the Churchill movie, where people say, well, there is one person. It's that classic movie trope. There is one person. Oh no, not him. And it's like cuts to Churchill. There could be a moment where we're in such a radical moment with the extraordinary grooming gang atrocities that someone could step in who would normally be beyond the pale, is what I'm saying. And that could, I'm not saying it'll literally be Tommy Robinson himself, although there was a very amusing, really, take from Elon Musk's dad, Errol Musk, who came in and said, I'll see if I can find it. He said that one day that Tommy Robinson would be Prime Minister of Britain, and everyone's like, "You what, mate?" But he said, "Yeah, completely." He said, "Nelson Mandela, no one thought could ever lead South Africa. He was a criminal. He was hated." He said, it's on Times Radio. There's a very good chance that Tommy Robinson will one day be the Prime Minister of England. Was it England? So he's already divided up the nation as well in this scenario. Similarly, people in South Africa would have told you you've lost your marbles if you told them Nelson Mandela would become president. So that's, but one thing I do like about that point, as sort of hyperbolic as it is that it shows how quickly things can change when there's a regime change. So in America, we're going to get onto this. Zuckerberg is suddenly kissing Trump's ass in various ways. He's completely changed his approach. And this can happen very quickly. So, if we did have a regime, a counter elite that took over with completely different values was led by someone like Farage or Rupert Lowe, you could imagine a scenario where everything's different and very quickly our views and the normies would fall in line so quickly. The normies who were woke would suddenly we're talking about cutting immigration. I'm telling you, this is how quickly things can happen, I believe. After a long time of a regime, when it falls, the new regime can look very different. That's my belief. And go on, what are you going to say something?
No, it's just conflating Nelson Mandela and Tommy Robinson. It is just continually amusing me. I'm not sure that's going to happen. But
Mandela went a lot further than Tommy Robinson in terms of violence. Tommy's chinned a few blokes, but Mandela was, really going for it.
I don't know if we're having that much of a cultural shift. We could be sat here in a year's time, and I could be going, do you know what, Nick? I was terribly wrong about that. Prime Minister Robinson has said some iffy things, but I do support in large his policies. So it'd be interesting to see where we end up on that. But I think it's interesting to watch, particularly Errol Musk, who is like the boomer version of of Elon here. And, often when these wild things are said, there's things that come from it that we just don't see at the time because our sensibilities are formed by the politics of the time and what's acceptable and what's not, and the Overton window, etc. So someone like Errol Musk saying something like Tommy Robinson could be prime minister right now, to me, sounds utterly outrageous. Now, I don't believe that'll ever change, but there's nothing to say that he couldn't find himself in politics in some way. And we're going to discuss this in the paid section. There are definitely people that are looking to get into politics that you wouldn't believe could do.
Mm-hmm. People will be annoyed that we keep mentioning the paid section, but stop mentioning it. It's only because we've been trying to organise the admin of this podcast while Paul's had terrible internet connection and what to put where. But that is we'll keep that as the YouTube and audio show. We've done a massive chunk there. And I think that was correct that we did that because it was such an important topic. So we should give the free content on the main topics and let people attack us. But and I thought it was some really important stuff that we got out there. And we're just doing our humble little bit. What can you really do? Just speak the truth, isn't it? And do your best. NickDixon.net is where we'll put the rest of it. And it's very cheap, and you can support us, support this work, get all my extra content, interviews with Carl Benjamin and Nima Parvini and Ben Habib. And I think I've got Richard Tyson there somewhere. Actually, he might be free, but we've got Lord Frost and so on. Probably try and get Rupert Lowe in future. And Paul, of course, is at Paul Cox Comedy. And so thank you for listening and watching the free or the YouTube, not really the free. They're great people, the YouTube and audio people. And we'll go to the pay bit. Anything you want to say, though, Paul?
No, just thanks very much for watching and listening. And thanks very much for all your feedback. Well, 90% of you. So it's clearly Dixon Cox is onto something, and long may it continue.
Yeah, people love Dixon Cox, so keep sending your positivity about Dixon Cox, but no negativity, because it's pro Dixon Cox only here. And negativity will just be deleted and blocked in the tyranny that is the way I run my YouTube channel, which is it's not free speech, it's utter tyranny. So you should know that. All right, we'll catch you lot again next week. Thank you very much.